Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss American Trading Corporation. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast of ours, The Secret War on Cash. I have with me today my co-host, frequent co-host, Chris Agelastos. Good morning, Chris. How are you today?
Good morning. Doing well, thank you.
Well, that's great to hear. We're going to talk today, as we normally do in the podcast, about various financial and economic things. Today, however, we're going to kind of focus on BRICS, and this is a topic that you've given us some good insight in the past on previous podcasts, and a lot's been happening there. It's very interesting to see, this whole BRICS situation kind of develop, if you will. And as we get nearer to the end of 2023, I think most people, instead of breathing a sigh of relief there, and by there I mean we're probably more so holding our breath as we get ready to enter into the new 2024 year as it relates to financial markets, the economy, and again, some of the things that we've discussed here on these podcasts. Granted, we've covered several stories over the last several months where the economy of today has taken a very negative toll on U.S. households, meaning we're not just talking about a tough year in the markets, but rather a specific as well as serious effect it's had on families' abilities to even just pay their bills. One of the upcoming changes being discussed in the article on your screen now, as we already referenced, is this BRICS alliance that's been developing. And I think, Chris, what's important for people to understand is that BRICS is not just the formation of a currency that has a gold backing, which certainly makes it more attractive than a fiat currency, which is backed by nothing. But BRICS represents an alliance or an agreement that's developing between various countries. And as you can see in this article, for those of you who are watching, or if you're listening, you can see it on the link there in the description. These BRICS nations are actually signing preemptive agreements which specifically state that commerce between them will be done in local currencies rather than US dollars. So if you want to talk about the handwriting being on the wall, this is somewhat the equivalency of stock shareholders publicly stating that they're going to be dumping their shares in the next year. So not only would that cause values to plummet due to the glut of shares in the supply, but they would drop even more just due to the anticipation of this share dump, if you will. So, Chris, why do you think this isn't being covered more in the mainstream media? Like, how in the world can the dollar survive this mass exodus?
Yeah, well, a good question. I think what maybe some people know, but probably a lot don't, is that 90% of the media out there that we're seeing every day, at least in the U.S., is owned by 6 companies, right? So not a lot of diversity there. You've got AT&T, CBS, Comcast, Disney, News Corp, and Viacom. Those round out the top 6. So those 6 entities essentially control 90% of what we see, which is kind of alarming, really. I mean, the first time I heard that, I thought, well, that can't be right. But lo and behold, it is. So I think, a lot of it is, what are the political and or, social groups, tied to those companies? What kind of message are they wanting to push? What do they think is important? And unfortunately, news these days is not so much about the news. It's really all about profit and getting eyeballs and people to tune in. So do people really want to talk about or hear about, I guess, the long-term ramifications of how our dollar's been mismanaged and these countries, a part of BRICS, leaving the dollar, or do they want to hear about the big news story of the day? I think we can all agree there's a lot of divisiveness on the news. And so what they're really presenting is what draws people in every day. And that's usually one team versus another, whether it's the Super Bowl or the Republicans versus the Democrats. And that's really what they're pushing is all the sensationalism, and they're skipping over a lot of the meat and potatoes, which is I think mostly these BRICS stories.
Yeah, I mean, and there's just no getting around the fact that with these nations doing what they're doing, forming this alliance, abandoning dollars, or making these pacts or agreements to no longer trade in dollars, but rather local currencies, there is just no way that is not going to have an impact and be felt here in the U.S. I mean, it's, the supply side, or excuse me, the demand side for the dollars just seems to be disappearing. And if people out there are wondering if this whole BRICS thing is real or just scary fluff, this next article might shed some light on just how real it is. It talks about how 6 new countries jumped on board with BRICS back in August of this year, and 20 more are slated to do so in 2024. Now, we've talked about this before, but something I'd like to point out again is that pretty much whenever you read, see, or hear anything about BRICS, invariably there will be a reference given of de-dollarization, is what they're calling it. And why that's so important to notice and understand is that this is more than just a hot new currency or investment that's catching on. It's a concentrated effort by a growing number of nations to dethrone the US dollar. It's intentional. Putin, who is a participating member, he's actually publicly stated exactly that. So again, another question with that, Chris, what impact do you think the abandonment of these dollars into BRICS might have on our economy here in the US?
Yeah, well, I think we're already seeing some of it. Certainly, we've seen over the last several years a big loss of purchasing power. How far our dollar goes. But what's going to happen, obviously, as this speeds up, is we're going to see a much more accelerated pace of inflation. Certainly when it comes to foreign goods as well, we're going to be using dollars that are worth less money to purchase foreign goods. And people might think, well, what does that mean to me? What am I buying that's foreign? Well, we don't make a whole lot of anything in this country anymore. So a lot of what you buy comes from overseas. And to that end, even a lot of the things that we do make here, take, some vehicles, Ford, what have you, that we manufacture here in the US, a high percentage of those parts come from overseas. And so that, that's gonna certainly affect us. We're going to see a lower standard of living. More of our dollars are going to have to go towards the essentials, right? Rent or mortgage, food, electricity, right? All the bare necessities. Those are people's priorities. So that means less fun money. Maybe less travel. Putting Christmas on the credit card, which a lot of families are already having to do. And I think one thing, as well, the U.S. has had such a advantage, really, with the dollar being the U.S. The world reserve currency, that losing that, we're going to have a much bigger fall. And so I think people are going to feel it a lot more here than maybe they would in other nations where they've already maybe gotten used to, or they're a little desensitized to some of these issues. I think it's going to hit a lot of people here like a ton of bricks. And BRICS, look at that. Didn't even plan that. But I mean, that's just a fact. It's, people are going to feel it. It's going to be swift and uncomfortable, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. And we're talking in terms of, as BRICS continues to develop and that situation continues to develop, but all of those things you just described, they're already happening. I mean, we, saw just recently in the news where, people are now having to dip into their retirement accounts, their 401ks, just to do things like you described, pay their groceries, pay their rent or mortgage, various bills, et cetera. So that's already happening. And then you compound that with, again, this growing BRICS situation, which from everything that I've seen, they're talking about that is only going to be amplified in the year ahead. It's hard to imagine how our currency and our economy is going to come out strong or standing, as that does continue to develop. So thank you for that, Chris. And I know this is something we'll be talking a lot more about in the weeks and months ahead, but it is something that is developing quite quickly, actually. So for those of you that are tuning in here today, if you'd like information on BRICS, or if you have not already received our secret war report, please contact our office. You can call at 1-800-289-2646 or visit us online at www.swissamerica.com. And we'll get you that report out. If you want information on the precious metals market, we can get that to you as well. All of it is complimentary or free. So don't hesitate to call if you have not already. If you're not following us on social media, please do so, as we'll frequently have information like this that we'll be putting out there just to kind of keep you apprised of what's developing. Follow us if you haven't already. Subscribe to this podcast. Please do that as well. And please feel free to comment. We'd love to hear from you. So, Chris, thank you again for, a great podcast, some great information. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we look forward to doing this again here sometime soon.